Everyone got a seat? Very good. Welcome everyone. So for those who don't know, of course this is a third Getting IT Right initiative seminar, so we're really starting to roll along now, so it's very nice. Just winding you back here a little bit, Getting IT Right, as it sounds, about improving IT in New Zealand. We've got a great opportunity in New Zealand to improve IT, for it to be one of our fundamental money-making mechanisms in New Zealand. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we don't have a lot of diamonds in our backyard or uranium or things like that, but we do have smart people in our country, so let's use them, right? So, what we're doing, we've used everyone's knowledge in the IT market and wherever we can get help, put that knowledge into our database, which is the Getting IT Right website, right? So it's available for everyone to use. We've done a nationwide survey with IDC, which we did a seminar on, and the results and everything is on the website, so you can go and grab that. And that sets a benchmark as to where we're at in January. Now is let's now talk about it. And that's your job. Take this away. Do talk about it, especially upstairs. Talk about it downstairs as well. I guess, you know, we've all got a role in this. But importantly, business do too. We do, they do. These seminars are about taking a topic from the website and talking about it to help sort of, you know, push that information out, keep talking about it, okay? So, yes, that's what it's about. I just realised that I had missed telling me the tour. Out the door. Yeah. So down, past the left side, introduce myself. That's better. Right, on to the guest speaker, the wonderful Mr. Holley. Now, just bring up the sheet. General Manager, Operations for Visible Results. Before this day, has got a number of IT management, sales, consulting roles, including Auckland Regional Council, the University of Auckland, the Royal New Zealand Foundation of the Blind. He's also been school trustee for 15 years, including time as board chair for his kids' school at Liston College. In addition, he provides consulting to a number of schools to the greater area on ICT and is board member for Accelerating Aotearoa Taskforce. So, very good work. In his spare time, he's also an officer for the New Zealand Army and has included an operational deployment in East Timor in 2001. And is currently an instructor in operational planning and leadership at the Canadian Forces College in Toronto. So, very good.
Got a Canadian.
Yeah. So,
I'm a Leafs fan. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much. And tonight I want to be a little bit contentious. It's a pity this is here because I'd actually like to sort of storm out and talk to you. So participation from everyone apart from Ian Howard is welcome. So please feel free to contribute. So,
Question.
Who had 30 seconds on the speech tape? So I really want to. I despise this saying. I absolutely think it's the most dumb thing that happens. The reason this statement happens though is because of us as in IT. Because IT doesn't align with the business. No one says accounting will align with the business. No one says HR will align with the business. The reason this statement gets made is because IT doesn't do what the business requires. What it's really saying is IT will sort it out and actually do what the business requires, not what IT thinks the business requires. Because IT is part of the business. It's not a separate part. So what I want to do though is talk about the place of IT. How many of you here in organisations where you've got a strategic plan, an IT strategic plan? Anyone? Quite a few have got an IT strategic plan. How many of you, leave your hands up if you think IT is strategic in your organisation? And leave your hands up still if it's actually in the senior management board papers that IT is strategic. A couple, so that's good. Great, so we'll come back and I'll ask a few of you guys questions about that because I have a real struggle about that. So who said this? So participation is encouraged. Any idea? Who said that? Ian Howard, was it? Yes, Zansu.
I wish I had.
Zansu's correct. Being an army officer, when you do a presentation, you always include quotes from dead people because they can't contradict you, basically. But it's actually quite true. and in fact as a country as a whole, we often will have strategies with no tactics to how to get the stuff into place, or we'll have tactics with no idea why the hell we're doing them. And it doesn't matter whether you're a left or right leaning, whether it's the Labour government or the national government, you always have outward policies, and how they actually do them doesn't occur, or they've got ideas to do stuff but no strategy as to why they're doing it. Just seems like a good idea at the time. And that happens in business all the time. So, you know, is IT strategy really, and as I said, please feel free to call out and disagree with me, otherwise it could be a very short presentation. So what am I going to talk about? I'm just going to give you a bit of an apology of sorts so you understand where I come from, and talk about some definitions, and hopefully that will engender some arguments from you guys and disagreements, because disagreements is good. One of the worst things we have in our New Zealand corporate culture is people shy away from disagreement and dissent. It's somehow seen as a bad thing. And in fact, when you're doing military planning, one of the things you want to say is you actually want different ideas. Because if everyone is saying, yes, that's a good idea, something's going hellishly wrong. And you need to have a culture where people can actually say, you know what, I think that actually sucks. Or I need to do something differently. Or have you thought about that? And we actually have a culture in New Zealand where people actually can't disagree. So there's some challenges there. So these are my definitions, but they're not set in stone. So please disagree with me. And I want to then talk about, and those of you who put your hands up all the way through, I'll ask you questions why IT is strategic in your organisations. Because we have this hang-up that IT to be important has to be strategic. Well, HR and accounting are always important in businesses. Are they strategic?
Yes.
So there, we'll come back. So you're the person I'm going to target. So that's great. So that's a perspective. And if they are strategic, and you have to understand why. And we'll talk through that. And then I'm going to work through a little bit of a strategy. Because I have a saying, and people have heard me, especially when I was at the ARC, there is no such thing as an IT project. There are business projects that have an IT involvement. And if you're an IT manager and you're doing a project and you can't show how it contributes to the strategic goals of the organisation, why the hell are you doing it? And when we come to that, I'm quite happy to take people to put up here's a project that's not a business project.
Yeah, like compliance and stuff like that. Sometimes you just reduce it.
But we'll come to that in and we'll ask you that. And even compliance, that makes it an IT project or not? We'll ask.
No, the business needs to combine.
Yeah.
An IT component.
Well, IT is part of the business, remember?
Yeah.
So where do I come from? So just so you know, in my background, I'm a truck driver. When I joined the army as a soldier, I was a student as well. So I've been a reservist for coming up. This is my 29th year, which is a little bit scary actually. I've been around a little bit long, but a bit of a while. Not quite that time. So here's a question for logistics. In the First World War, what was the biggest commodity that was required to drive the First World War? What was the number one commodity that they needed the most of? Fuel, sort of. Fuel for who? Horses. Hay. You see lots of stuff around these things, but horses still moved most of the stuff. In fact, if you go back through history, the history of warfare was about feeding either the soldiers and later on feeding the horses, which is why they went to wars at a certain time and had to go back for the harvest. So the First World War, even though it had all the stuff, all the industrialisation, it was actually still about feeding something important, which happened to be the horses. And I would actually tend to argue that IT today is actually the stuff of feeding the organisation. So that's my perspective. That's me much slimmer and younger. Up in East Timor during the presidential elections there. Here's me on a hill out in Wairau, as officers tend to do, telling people how good I am and how their plans are really screwed up. Sounds like a general manager. Yeah, any general managers here? Yeah. And how I'd have done it if I'd been in charge. And this is me instructing in Canada. So I instruct in leadership and operational planning for a whole lot of forces from New Zealand, Australia, NATO, a whole lot of other stuff. I go up there next month, July, summer, warm, cold beer. Yeah. That's my background. I'm an army officer, I've got to have Blackadder. The scary thing about this is I really get upset about how bad our strategy planning, I call it strategy planning, not strategic planning, because there is a difference, how our planning in New Zealand, whether it's strategic or operational or tactical level, how bad it is. And I was at at a conference a couple of years ago, I got called in because the senior officer who would normally be there wasn't there. And so I got to sit in. And a guy from the Office of Strategic Management of the Army came and Marty turned up. And there's this board of old colonels and brigadiers. And he used the term stale, pale and male, which describes boards of management and boards in this country, across the board. And so we have this challenge because often the people who've actually caused the failures are the same people who then are trying to fix them. And I actually said to these brigadiers and colonels, I'm a lieutenant colonel, so I'm like making the coffee for these guys, sirs, why don't we get on this board, because this was about reserve matters for New Zealand, why don't we get a young captain and a young corporal? Oh no, they wouldn't know. We know what the soldiers want. And it was like, you don't actually understand. And so we have a real challenge, and we keep repeating the mistakes that we've made over and over again.
What do you want, darling?
It's Captain Darling here. General Melton wants to see you about a highly important secret mission.
What's going on, darling?
Captain Blackadder to see you, sir.
Ah, excellent. That's the short back and side there, you
Yes, that's Corporal Black, sir. Captain Blackadder is here about the other matter, sir, the secret matter.
Ah, yes, the special mission. And he is Blackadder. Now, what I'm about to tell you is absolutely tip-top secret. Is that clear?
It is.
Now, I've compiled a list of those with security clearance. Have you got it, darling?
Yes, sir.
Read it, please.
It's top security, sir. I think that's all the captain needs to know.
Dog search, let's hear the list in full.
Very well, sir. List of personnel cleared for mission Gainsborough, as dictated by General C.H. Melton. You and me, darling, obviously. Field Marshal Haig, Field Marshal Haig's wife, all Field Marshal Haig's wife's friends, their family servants, their family servants' tennis partners, and some chap I bumped into in the mess the other day called Bernard.
So, it's maximum security, is that clear?
Quite clear, sir. Only myself and the rest of the English-speaking world is there.
Good man. Now, Field Marshal Haig has formulated a brilliant new tactical plan to ensure final victory in the field.
Ah. Will this brilliant plan involve us climbing out of our trenches and walking very slowly towards the enemy, sir?
How could you possibly know that, Blackadder? It's classified information.
It's the same plan that we used last time, and the 17 times before that.
Exactly! And that is what is so brilliant about it. It will catch the watchful hound totally off guard. Doing precisely what we've done 18 times before is exactly the last thing they'll expect us to do this time. There is, however, one small problem.
That everyone always gets slaughtered in the first 10 seconds.
That's right. And Field Marshal Haig is worried that this may be depressing the men attached. He's looking to find a way to cheer them up.
Well, his resignation and suicide would seem the opposite.
Who's dealt with that in a corporate culture? Yeah, I mean, it just happens all the time. And it's a challenge, and it's about why we're doing stuff. And in the Army, when I was at our tactics school instructing, we would call it the Melchett plan. We actually had, I've seen a student present a plan where we do these tactical exercises where they have to work out, they'd be attacking a position. And they'd mark out that what we would call the killing area where the enemies put all their weapons through, and he'd attack through it. And he said, we asked him why, he said, well, because the enemy won't expect it. You know, it happens, and it happens in a corporate culture as well. It happens with IT. And so, it's about a purpose. And part of this came over the last couple of years, because of what I was doing with the military, and I was looking at what was happening in IT, and some stuff started to jar for me. So I really started to think about how all the stuff all tied together. And one of the real challenges is in New Zealand is we have this view that IT to be important has to be strategic. Now, I'm a logistics officer, okay? So I'm not strategic for the military and the army. I'm an enabler. I make sure the people who are at the sharp pointy end get to do the stuff they need to do. So I'm an operationally important, I'm not strategically important. Because in the end I can provide all the bullets and beans up to the front, that's not strategic. Because I can't do the fighting. It's the guys who do the fighting that are strategic. So here's an example I will use. A company decides it wants to increase its sales, and so it has a strategic initiative to put in a CRM. Is the CRM strategic?
No.
Why not?
It's a tool. Having said it outright, without even knowing the plan, the scoping, and the complications of what you're currently doing compared to what the CRM can do, currently on the market you've got about 25 CRM packages, they all do something different, and so they all have different directions. But to actually say it outright or say no, cover my butt, because the first CRM that comes to light guarantee will be the wrong one.
Yeah. And you said it was a tool. What does that mean? You say it.
That's like, for example, use your example. You're a logistics officer, you supply stuff, you can supply machine guns, rifles, handguns. You know, it makes a difference to a soldier. To you, it doesn't matter because you've got your crates there, but you don't know without somebody telling you which crates you then want, which crates will make the most difference. You can't make a decision.
Who uses a CRM in a sales organisation?
The salespeople.
So who are the strategic assets?
Salespeople.
What's operationally important to them? The CRM, right? It enables them, it makes them better. Does it mean it's any less important to the organisation? No. Is it actually strategic? Well, it's pretty important, and we're quite a small nation, we get focused on this. When you go overseas, and a lot of you have worked in, if any of you have worked in large organisations, if you're the senior operations manager, that's a big part because you're the enabler for the organisation. Who's come across those roles? Yeah. Yeah? And they're quite important, aren't they?
But if you have something though that is beyond the CRM that links with that CRM, so therefore when a customer comes up and you're doing a plan and you charge out to the clients, I think it's a fantastic deal, here's a solution, and by the way, that also lets know the logistics of, hey, we've got this plan coming on, can we actually supply 1,300 of these widgets?
Yep.
Certainly you can. Now we start getting to talk to each other. That
yep.
talks the right hand.
Yep.
In military, I know, being ex-military, it often didn't happen because you had to write the long cuts.
Exactly. So let's work through this a bit more. Sorry?
Yeah, I think it's
you don't have to put your hand up.
Yeah, you had to put my hand up. I don't think it matters which CRM is chosen. What's strategically important is that they use it operationally.
Yeah.
And therein lies the nature of the problem, I think.
And in fact, the problem is it's a classic one. We put the CRM, we expect sales to point up. Where's the training? Where's the change management? Where's all those other things that have to occur in the organisation? Because it's the asset, and we talk about, when I talk about this a bit later on, it's the doer. What actually does the work? And you know, I actually believe in New Zealand, actually, there's very few organisations where IT is really significantly strategic. And I'll use a simple example, TradeMe. TradeMe can't operate without its computers. And Ian and I were talking about this before. If you've got a decent BCP in an organisation, you should be able to operate for some period of time without your IT. Because it's the people normally who do most of the business. What I want to say though is being operationally important is actually incredibly important, because no one would say we're not going to have our accountants. We might like to say that, sorry Bruce, but you know, necessary evil. So I just want to take some definitions, and we hear these terms bandied around all the time. A lot of business planning actually, believe it or not, actually comes from the military. And the reason for that is because, you know what, if it works when people are dying, it's probably going to work when it's actually all pretty safe and rosy. You know, I'd often say to my staff, you know, will someone die if we get this wrong? And in business it doesn't. We all get wrapped up in how important it is, but you know, in the end, unless you're dealing with some critical stuff, 24/7 stuff, so when I was at the ARC, our civil defence systems, well yes, if we got it wrong, people could die. But most of what we do actually isn't that essential to people's lives. If you're working in a DHB providing health services and information, that can become critical. But how many here actually work with systems day in, day out that if they go wrong will kill people? One down the back. Who's that with, can you say?
St. John.
St. John, there you go. The ambulance turns up at the wrong place, so that's a straight out example, or takes too long. So tactical, operational and strategic. We've always, strategies or strategic's been known for a long time. Do you know who really started the term it in the first place? Bit of military history here. Little short French guy. Napoleon was really sort of got into it. Tactical is the doing. Strategic is the why. Operational is tying the two together and making sure the doing can actually support the why. Basically. Who came up with this idea of operational stuff, do you know? Quite interesting actually when you think about it. Because a lot of our major military theory about how we operate these days actually came from the Germans. I'll talk about that. But who came up with this? Operational war. Any ideas?
For not going for thousands.
Sorry? No. It was actually the Russians. So the Russians came up with this idea of operational level of war, recognising that you needed to link strategic and tactical. I don't get too bogged down in the military. So let me just pull some words together. And this really came to me when I was involved at the ARC dealing with the Auckland Transition Authority. And as an aside, there was no plan for IT for the new Auckland Council. At one point, a reporter rang me up from, I think, Computer World and said, John, I put in a local government official information request, or an official information request asking for Mike Foley's strategic plan. And he came back and told me he didn't have one. This is in July 2010. The council's going to kick off in November. And he said there wasn't one. He said, is that the case? And I said, yes. So there was no formal planning for how stuff would be done for IT for the Auckland Council. So I mentioned these three levels: tactical, operational and strategic. And this goes really to a lot of the work that Scott's been doing. So within a IT framework, thinking in general terms, what does tactical mean when we're doing an implementation?
We're talking about projects
here. What would tactical be? It's the project. Operational is where we call programs of work, and strategic is a portfolio of work. And we have a real struggle in New Zealand to group stuff together. We get quite focused on the tactical, on I've got these projects to do. The interesting thing is, when you pull together a whole series of projects, that goes...
I'd like to challenge you.
Fire away then, great.
In terms of programs, they actually are both the operational and tactical.
They can be, you're correct.
And portfolio would include both programs and projects.
Yeah, so this is a hierarchy. So this is a hierarchy. So I'm saying the programs will all fit under a portfolio and projects will all fit within a program. So that was my mistake.
Okay.
Because in the military level, everything tactical drives to operational through to strategic. Because for us in the military, strategic is done by the politicians, as an example. So for me, the portfolio is at that senior management level board. How many of you end up reporting at a level to the board about IT? Quite a few of you said you were strategic. If you're strategic, you'll be reporting to the board. Anyone here from Air New Zealand? Air New Zealand, I know, has some stuff that goes to the board. So if you're not reporting to the board, you're not really strategic in a governance framework. So
was the people who left ACC today, was that tactical, operational or strategic?
It's a retreat. It's a French military manoeuvre. And let's talk about stuff. So in an organisation, when you're doing something for a division or something, you might have a program of work to implement something. And the reason why I say it's a program and we get focused on the IT stuff is if we're putting in that CRM as an operational program, it's not just the IT projects, there's the HR projects, there's training, there's a whole lot of stuff that has to occur. There's a whole group of projects to achieve that program of work. And when I was at the ARC, I got frustrated because this is how councils and it's how government works. We would have a whole process where the community of Auckland were consulted about the 10-year plan. And the council would put up all its priorities, and then across the council, the different departments would put in, which are effectively at the operational level, would put in their plans about what they wanted to do, and the council would then get together. There would be a whole lot of jiggery-pokery, councillors putting in their favourite plan, things that they wanted, and they'd come up with a program of work that the council would fund. And you draw a line at a certain point when you ran out of money, but the council would prioritise it. IT, on the other hand, was you've got so much money, here's your bucket of money, put all the IT projects in and draw a line. Which meant, for me, I could have projects that we were going to run that were actually of less importance than projects that didn't make it on the other side, or vice versa. My view was, why wasn't it? And we actually moved to a system whereby we stopped doing IT projects. If we were doing a project, the general manager of whichever department was doing it had to be the sponsor. It was their project, and we would support them in it. And the whole idea was to get all that stuff under the same body of work. But that's the challenge, and often IT is put to one side, and it's not done as part of the overall, what is it contributing, which is where we get this IT will align with the business.
And do you think there's some confusion there because people don't actually understand what a project portfolio and program is?
Yeah.
Therefore, you know, they think that a project can deliver benefits, whereas it's only a project can deliver outcomes.
Yes. Exactly. Absolutely the correct thing. That's the challenge. But we understand that because it's tactical and it's touch, and people like to get down to the details. Stepping back and letting go and saying, oh, this is the outcome I want, go away and make it occur, that's a real challenge for people. Yeah. So, back to the ARC. So we put this portfolio program governance in. We did it for IT because I'm a big fan of IT eating its own dog food first. Because there's nothing worse than IT pushes stuff out but doesn't use it themselves. So my view always was that we would actually use stuff first because then we'd make sure everything was working properly before we gave it to anyone else. So myself and my PMO manager put together this portfolio system, Sentient, that's used by a few large organisations around Auckland. And we presented it to my boss, the COO, and we showed it all. We had all the different project scoring and everything else, and we'd taken all the values and the key drivers from our long-term plan. And Brian said, no, we can't use those. And I go, what do you mean? Those are our KPIs effectively for the region, and you don't want them to score your projects. Who's come across that? Because what it suddenly means is those sacred cows that people want to get through, you actually don't make it across the line. And it's an interesting thing, and Scott and I were talking about this before, when you start to go to much more formal scoring of projects within programs and portfolios, it actually brings a rigour. And it's not the squeaky wheel that gets it anymore. Yeah, and you mentioned things like compliance, and those will drive up the scoring of a project. But it's quite interesting when organisations do this, what becomes important. Because if you've got the values and the drivers of the organisation, when you start doing this stuff, it actually makes it quite clear what you should be doing. And this is exactly how it works in the military. You focus on what we would call a mission essential task. What are things we absolutely have to do? Rather than what tends to happen in New Zealand, we tend to try to do too much all the time. So, who disagrees with this? Hopefully none of you. Strategy does not equal strategic. So I turned up at the ARC and my boss at the time said to me, John, I need you to come up with an IT strategic plan. And I said to her, being a good army officer, so where's your plan for corporate services? There wasn't one. Hang on, so you want me to do a plan to support your stuff, but you don't have a plan for how we're going to do stuff for the organisation. And so it was like, I mean, in the end I went around the whole organisation. I had to go to everyone and find out what they wanted, which is probably what my boss maybe should have been doing. But here was the situation. I had to produce a plan in absence of any plan for my boss above me. Who's had to do that? Who's had to do an IT plan? Yeah, quite a few of you.
Most IT people, because IT is across the whole business.
But then it should be at a more senior level. But there's a disconnect. So suddenly I'm planning, and I actually don't know if I go back to that previous slide, a whole lot of tactical stuff or even operational stuff, and it's disconnected from the higher level stuff. And that's the challenge. You know, it's a real challenge to go to your boss and say, and I did this at my current job. He wanted an IT plan. I said, where's your plan? What do you mean? You know, my plan should be contributing to the organisation. And that's why, you know, there's nothing wrong, and all IT shops should have strategies. And I would call it, most IT shops should at least have an operational plan, if not a tactical plan. And it really comes down to where you fit in the organisation. But, you know, for me at the ARC, I was dealing with the general managers of departments. So therefore I was working at the operational level because I was helping them achieve their operational and strategic goals. But, you know, this is the whole thing. Strategic is about some long-term or overall interests. And if you're doing a project and you can't say how it contributes to that, there's a real challenge. Who's this? Ian was there. You can say Ian.
Isn't that the man that said, the lady said, you're drunk? And he said, yes, and you're ugly. And in the morning I'll be sober.
This is why we need national standards, okay? I can tell you. Yalta, okay? These are the strategic commanders. Slightly important guys. Behind all the military, effectively operational commanders, because in the military we're not strategic, we're actually operational. We're achieving one line of operation for the political, because at a strategic level you have military, you have economic, you have political and information. or diplomatic. So, you know, these are the guys, these are the boards. How many of you talk on a regular basis to the boards? The CFO talks to the board, yep. The CEO talks to the board. If you're a CIO, do you ever talk to the board? Because in the end, these are the strategic masters, and if you're not talking to them in some form or another, are you really strategic? And this is questions you might take away. The challenge for us, and I think Owen says it as well, is how you make yourself relevant to them. It's not going to happen.
Do you think, though, from an IT perspective, that, maybe I'm Pollyanna here, but the fact that IT should be part of that decision when making those operational decisions, and the military being military, you normally had it, okay, we're going to do this, this and this, and can we make it work?
Yeah.
Why not? Oh, well, actually, because we're doing this, this and this as part of the planned maintenance and whatever the case is, I'm estimating. Oh, okay, well, we can work around that, but beside that, can we still make it work?
Exactly.
IT in this day and age is exactly the same as far as I see, maybe I'm wrong, that IT should be part of that decision-making process regardless. Exactly.
So it's how you engage, and it's exactly the correct thing. And in fact, the worst thing you can say to your boss in the military is, no, you can't do it, sir. It's more, I'll get back to you, sir. You know, I want to give you... And that's the whole thing. So in the military, if I'm sitting there as a logistics officer, and this happens in logistics across all the services, whatever rank you're at, you'll normally sit in the briefing with officers who are a rank above you, the tactical commanders or the operational commanders, because that's your place in the order of things. But you're just as important. They're all the decision makers, but you're there to support them. And one of the challenges is we have for IT, and this happened to me at the ARC, I turned up to one of the general managers and says, hi, I'm John Holley, blah, blah, blah. And Janine said to me, so she says, well, what can you do for me? And I said, no, what do you want me to do for you? She was so used to IT telling her what IT would do for her, not what she needed. You know, and that's the challenge. And it's exactly that thing, you know. We might not be the major decision makers, but we should be there to give advice and actually helping them. But often it means we don't know enough about the business. Scott.
A little bit off topic, but I guess the other thing that happens is when this occurs, you get empty staff, because the work you're doing is...
They understand why.
Is relevant, not what the hell am I doing this for?
They understand why.
In recruitment, man, do we see that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, no, it's exactly right. I mean, one of the first things I did at the ARC, I took my staff all down to the contact centre and got them to listen on the contact centre to the calls coming in. Because they were all doing the typical IT stuff. We can do all this wonderful stuff. Great, it's our own little world. We're doing great stuff. But did it actually matter to the public of Auckland? And when they sat and listened to the public of Auckland calling into the contact centre, what were the two most important things for a council, for the Auckland Regional Council? It's pretty easy. Rates was one. No, roads wasn't us, because that was the Auckland Transport, Auckland Regional Transport. The regional parks. The biggest discretionary thing people engaged us with was on the regional parks, which is the jewel in the crown of Auckland. And my guys are just, the regional parks were just out there. Suddenly it was like, these things are really important to the public of Auckland. Hell, we need to really start to lift up the priority of giving to the work required for the park rangers.
Self-evident.
Sorry?
It's self-evident over their own website.
Yeah, and that's why we didn't make the changes. You have to understand your whole business, not well, but you have to understand where you're going to contribute. And as I said, the worst thing I hate is the IT will align with the business. You know, it's absolutely, if you're hearing that, if your CEO or someone saying IT needs to align with us, it means you're not doing your job properly. Because if you're doing your job properly, you'll understand what their needs are, you'll be meeting their demands, but also you'll be going, by the way, I came across this the other day, I think this could help you in what you want to do.
I think that's part of it, though, is the language barrier. If you're talking to somebody at a CEO level or at board level, they don't understand technological jargon. You need to be able to translate it to something they can understand, and in a 15-second window,
yeah.
Because that's usually the time span.
Exactly.
That's the attention span you're going to work with. That's the challenge we have at both.
Exactly, and that's exactly the thing. And I went to a thing last year, I think for the Computer Society, that had graduates at the university. A couple of them asked me about, you know, being a BA, what would require. I says, explain to me why I need to do a mail upgrade without mentioning email upgrade without talking about technology. Put it into a business context. You put it into a business context, forget any of the technology. The technologies are tactical. It's right down the bottom. You know, if you have to talk technology, it's because for some reason the person has a deep knowledge and wants to know about it. You should be there addressing their business requirements. And do they actually care how you do it? They just want it to work. So yeah, I hate that term. Anyone know who this is?
Oh.
Yeah. Was he a great tactician?
Yep.
Fought brilliant battles. Was he a great operational commander? And an operational commander in the military is corps level and above. Was he a great operational commander?
Yes.
No, he wasn't. Do you know why? Because he could win a fight, but he wouldn't win the war. He would run out of fuel, he'd overcommit himself, he knew he couldn't do the stuff, he didn't listen to his staff officers, so he actually got into trouble. So he was brilliant on the battlefield, but he couldn't sustain what he did. And in fact, in Africa, he was just meant to hold British forces, because the main effort was meant to be the Western Front. So he didn't listen to what the company, the German High Command wanted, which was, Rommel, just keep some British troops tied down in Africa, keep them busy, that's all we want you to do, nothing more, nothing less. That was his role. He wasn't strategic for the German High Command, but he assumed he was. He went ahead of himself. He decided he would do his own thing.
Thanks, John. The photograph you showed us of the military gentlemen, they come with hundreds, if not thousands of years of tradition and discipline and something we would probably call culture.
Yep.
I'm very interested in your view on the influence of culture on strategy, operations, tactics.
Culture comes into it, but what I would say is, in the modern military today, we're the only ones who are actually trained in operational planning on large scale. So, you know, I go to Canada, they run a 2-week exercise, over $1 million Canadian spent. This is just in classrooms. And students are lodging forces of 100,000 into a make-believe Africa. It's redone. It's thought processes. So that's why when significant events happen like the tsunami in Samoa, military officers go in to do a lot of the planning. We train for the stuff all the time. We don't train people in New Zealand at any level, as far as I know, really how to do operational planning. It's just pure luck. And I know from my regular force friends who go into places, they've been taught this as from junior officers through, they go and just do their standard planning, and people go, wow, you're really good. And they're going, hang on, this is just what we're expected to do. So that's the culture. You're taught to deal with chaos and large-scale stuff.
When you apply that to business, how important do you think the culture of the business is to the
very.
version?
You have to understand that, which is why the most misforgotten thing in project management is change and culture, change management and culture. Down the back, there's a question.
Yeah. Do you think it's because we have a culture of not saying that game playing and role playing, which is what we do with it, for a week, it's not important. You know, businesses think, hey, it's not really important, it's not relevant, it's not the max dollars. Not thinking longer term that, hey, if we actually try this, we actually question ourselves and go, hey, can we do it better? How can we do it better?
Exactly. Well, opening night of the Rugby World Cup, I live in Kingsland, so I walked to the ground, as did everyone who came on the trains. You heard the different players from the councils and 18 who saying, oh, we didn't expect this, we sort of guessed it or hadn't. In the military, you would have war gamed all that stuff. I happen to know that Auckland Transport had a whole lot of buses ready to go to move people if things gone wrong, but they never got turned on. No one had actually sat around as a whole group and pulled them all together and says, right, Rugby World Cup opening night, this could be big, let's plan it and see what's happened. Let's run some scenarios and see what will go wrong. Let's acid test what we call wargaming our plan. Exactly that.
They expected 65,000, over 95,000.
I know. But if Joel Cayford in his blog said, you know, they knew what the capacity of the rail was. Simple Logistics said how many could move by rail.
It ain't going to work.
No, exactly. So anyway, so this is, you mentioned Clausewitz before. All praise to anyone who's read his books, even the English translate, it's a struggle. But this is the guy who drove military theory much, for pretty much all the Western nations of the world today. It's why the Germans kicked butt in the Second World War at the start. And I've summarised a couple of his plans. And he talks about strategic planning, but this goes to planning and all. And do you do this in your organisations? Act with utmost concentration. Put aside the dross. What are the things that are most important? Focus on those first and foremost. Get them done. If you've got spare resources, focus on the other things. But how many of you in the army, we call the term pepper pot, how many of you spread stuff across to try and do a whole lot of stuff? Does this sound familiar? Too many projects. Can never do them all. And are they all important? And the second one is just get on and do it. I heard some people talking about the RFP process, especially central government. It's actually not what I call risk avoidance. It's not risk mitigation, it's risk avoidance. You take so much risk avoidance, you actually never end up making the right decision. Who knows why the Germans kicked the French's butt at the Maginot Line? Who knows? Anyone have any ideas? Throw them out there.
Sort of quick.
Quick? But why were they quick?
They found the weaknesses around the sides.
They went around the sides?
Yeah.
Technology mismatch.
Technology mismatch. Who had more tanks? Who had the better tanks?
Germans.
French.
Attitude.
It's a whole lot more stuff. The Germans actually, a lot of it, they went through the Maginot Line. Everyone thinks they went around, a lot of it they went through. Big difference in philosophy. And I liken it to the way, in the old British way, if I was a platoon commander, I'd be told, go take that hill, John, with your platoon, and tell me when you've got it. Right, sir, get the hill. Sir, I've got the hill. And he says, right, I'm off to catch the bridge. Catches the bridge, calls his boss. Boss goes, says, boss, I got the bridge. Boss goes into the capture the town. The German method says, John, I want you to capture that bridge, that hill, so I can get to the bridge, because the boss has to get to the town. I capture the bridge, I see there's no one on the, I capture the hill, see no one's on the bridge, I go, I know what my boss wants to achieve, I can help him get his goal, I can get there. Boss, I've actually got to the bridge. The boss goes, brilliant, I can get to the town, and there's this knock-on effect. It's what we call empowering people. Understand their part in the picture. The Germans worked on 60 to 65% of the knowledge. They had a 65% plan on the day and trusted their commanders to make decisions. They knew mistakes would occur. And when mistakes occur in the military, that means people die. Right? But they knew that was going to happen. The French produced, and you can go and see the archives, produced brilliant, perfect plans a day late. Because it was back at Central Command. And there's a real message there. I think we've actually got to that point, especially in government, where it's overly complicated, over-complex, risk avoidance. You take some risks, but if you don't take risks, you end up never delivering, and people get upset. So the Germans, it was about a philosophy that says we're actually going to empower our commanders to know what they're doing and why, right down to the bottom level. Whereas the French, they wanted the perfect plan. I'm sure you've all seen that. The presentation's got to be available anyway, so if you want it. It says, for those who can't see, how the customer explained it, how the project leader understood it, how the analyst designed it, how the programmer wrote it, how the business consultant described it, how the project was documented, what operations installed, how the customer was billed, how it was supported, what the customer really wanted or needed.
Did the council use consultants?
Yes.
Don't even get me started on that one.
I understand that.
So I just want to go through, I've been putting some things out there, and one of my challenges is if you've got IT projects going in your organisation at the moment, can you link them, at least indirectly, through to strategic goals or initiatives of the organisation? Can you look at some board documents or the business plan for the organisation says this project supports this outcome for every project? And if you can't do that for every project, then those projects that don't contribute to those outcomes, and if you can say to me, I've got too much stuff on, then why are you doing them? Big challenge. An email upgrade. Is an email upgrade an IT project or a business project?
Business.
And why is it a business project?
Allows you to communicate.
Sorry?
Hopefully allows you to
Communicate?
Business impact.
Business impact, isn't it? So who should own an email upgrade for the organisation? Should it be the CIO or the sales manager? You can argue about that, but it is a business impact, isn't it? It's not an IT project. I'm upgrading these email systems. In fact, I'm not even doing that. We're going to upgrade the email environment that we run because we can do these wonderful new things and I can guarantee delivery. I'm not going to tell you what's underneath it, but it actually is a business project to business benefits. Is it going to make us more profitable? Is it going to make us more efficient? Is it going to make us more effective? If it's not doing any of those, why am I doing it? So I'll just go through a bit of a strategy thing. And I do this, and it's the military stuff. And we're going to talk about ends, ways and means. And we sort of talked about these things in general as we've been going through. Ends are obviously, pretty clear what we want to achieve. I've learned what verbs are being an officer now. And what are the resources? So, what's that?
What else?
And I'd like this person to become the President of the United States. Yeah, couldn't necessarily be worse in some ways. Now, that's an objective. So you're really discounting it. One of the things about planning, whether it's strategic, operational or tactical, is saying, what is the plan, what do I want to achieve, and now let me go and work out, can I achieve it? My other pet hate is IT shops, and someone comes and asks them, they say, can't do it. I told my staff in the end, the only people who were allowed to say no to end users were myself or the team leaders. The staff had to say yes, or I'll have to get back to you. You know, it's like the old storeman who would actually not, you know, in the army stores, who would never give you stuff. So let's work out a plan to make Madonna the President of the United States. Because that's all a plan is. You still have to execute it. So I'm going to use a thing called the strange analysis, and it's just an example, and it's something I use. And the reason about this is, one of the problems when we come to planning is it's incredibly complex. And people get lost in the chaos and the complexity, and it gets too much for them. So one of the things we learn in the military is you learn how to make it more simple.
Because we're pretty simple guys, basically. And there's this thing called the strange analysis, and it's called the strange analysis because a guy called Dr. Joe Strange, not because of that, he is strange. And he talked about
centre of gravity, critical capabilities, critical requirements, critical vulnerabilities. As I said, you've got the presentation. My email's on it, so if you want a paper or two, I can send these to you. So we're talking about Madonna. So what was the end for Madonna? Because the end was the objective. So what's the end? Yeah. Madonna wants to become the President of the United States. Pretty tough, right? So what are some of the ways that Madonna can become the President of the United States? Now, this is the thing about planning. What happens is in organisations, people start closing down their options. One of the key things when you're teaching people planning is keep your options as wide as you can, as long as you can, because otherwise you miss valid ways of doing things. You miss innovation, because you get trapped into doing the things the old way. Anyone here from the University of Auckland? Been to the University of Auckland? When did they just have their capping? You know, when they all march through the town and hold up all the traffic. It's in May. Do you know why the University of Auckland graduates students in May? I used to be the ICE manager for the student admin, so I know that people will come up for a whole lot of reasons why.
Less traffic on the road.
At the start, by now, at this time of the year, the university has a pretty good handle on who will graduate. Okay, pretty good handle on who will graduate anyway. They pretty much know before the end of November everyone who can graduate. All the new universities graduate their students in December. And if you're a student, that's brilliant. Why? You finish your studies, you do your exams, you go get pissed in Queen Street, and then, excuse my French, and then you graduate. And you go off to wherever you're going to go. University of Auckland and the other old universities, you have to come back. So you have all these people in absence here, right? The reason that the University of Auckland still graduates its students in May is because they used to have to send the exam scripts on a boat to the UK. And so May was the earliest they could graduate their students. Have they changed their business practice? No. But, you know, if you did a planning process, you'd say, right, when can we do it? When's the first safe moment we can graduate? When's the last safe? When does it make sense? But their whole planning process is, we have to do it in May. It's no different to a corporate world. So some of the ways. So how can Madonna become the President of the United States?
Senator.
Sorry?
Become a senator.
Senator, maybe. It's a bit slow, but she wants to be it. Down the back?
Vice President and hope the President can't.
Get carked, okay, that's an innovative one, not what I thought of.
Military coup.
Brilliant. What else? What tends to happen now?
Most votes.
Buy. I could buy the election, but even Madonna doesn't have enough money.
Most votes.
That's a good one, Ian. She could pray for a miracle, but given some of her videos, unlikely to occur. Or, as you said, get voted. This stuff isn't hard, is it? So we've got some options. So let me work out the means. How can those means work? And there's a whole lot of stuff. There's no military backing. You can start saying things aren't going to work. So at this point, you can start knocking some options out if they're not going to be achievable. And you might still have several in. I'm just going to go through this as a simple example. So the means to be elected is, well, she's going to have to get elected. And there's a whole lot of means that go with that. And this is not exhaustive, this is just me making this up. We're actually stealing it from someone else's article, more importantly. So what's the most important one there? What?
Enough votes.
Votes. because anything else doesn't matter. Now, this is classic, even in businesses. When you sit down, the things that you have to do to achieve an outcome, do you prioritise and say what the most important things are?
Often not.
And what should you do? When you do prioritise them, stuff might drop off because you don't have the resources to do it. But we're Kiwis, we're so good at saying we'll just try to do the whole lot. And this is just a rough graphic. Don't take this as things. So the end was being the POTUS, President of the United States. The ways we'd worked out that was to be elected. And so, put into a verb, to elect. All the means and the votes. And the question is, we know that the votes is the key thing to become elected. And who elects? It's the voters. The votes are important, they're a capability, but the centre of gravity, the most important thing, the thing that will do what we require is the voters. Now, I've taken my staff, for instance, when I was at the ARC, through a similar model for doing our IT planning. And we went through a similar model about the stuff we had to do. Do you know where technology appeared on this when we started doing our planning? It hardly even made the screen. Because it was just a tactical thing that we were going to do to achieve certain outcomes. Now, that's a very simple model about saying how you do that. You can easily take this model about raising profit in an organisation. What are the things we're going to do and how are they? And I could go through it, and I often do for long periods of time. It's not rocket science. It's just putting it down and breaking it down into a simple thing. Or having someone to work through it with you and say, right, let's just go through and explain and challenge the assertions of how you do stuff.
Sorry, can you please
CC is a critical capability. So these are the means. The critical capability is one that you have to work on. So in the military, that's the thing that you've also got to make sure occurs. So, for instance, in the first Gulf War, the centre of gravity for the coalition forces, for the enemy, was actually the Republican Guard. So their entire planning process was how to destroy the Republican Guard. And there was a disconnect between the operational and strategic, which is interesting because they didn't achieve that effect. And so they had to go back in 2003 or so and redo it all. So these are the capabilities. I've got a paper anyway if you want to have a read about this. The key thing is we tend to forget, we get focused on the technology stuff. It's the doers who do stuff. So you can imagine your CRM is over here. It's the sales staff. It's the doers who actually are the important things. And this is where IT does stuff to an organisation rather than IT doing stuff for the organisation. So, Madonna, there was a bit of a guffaw. Madonna not possible? You sure? Really?
Anything's possible.
So I just want to finish off on this, which I think is probably a good point to finish. This was a guy called Jomini who was a competitor effectively of Clausewitz, lost out in the Doctrine War. Okay. That's all, folks. Questions? I left your stunned mullets.
That was very good, thank you.
If you email me there, I can send you through the paper, a couple of papers on Strange if you really would like to know about it and need to go to sleep at night.
Sorry, just one question. Are there any other operational ways of thinking other than the military?
There certainly are, and there's different models, and people have applied them. There was a lot of stuff done around the 50s and the 60s about systemisation. I'm trying to remember the name. And that was where Robert McNamara was the Defence Secretary, and they were trying to, this is where it was all about, I'm trying to remember the term, I've lost it now, but this was out of the RAND Corporation, and they tried to make it very mathematical. We talk about, the interesting thing about operational planning, it's science and art. There are some mathematics that you can do that says, these are the things, so Rugby World Cup, I know how many thousand people I can get on a train at night. Right? I can do that stuff. But there's some other stuff that's just art that requires, that's those years of experience and also thought process. So it's not something that, I presented this to my boss, talked to him about it, he says, have you got a spreadsheet I can fill in to make this all happen? Because a lot of people, you know, if you can't put it into a spreadsheet, this requires some creative thought and understanding. What we also do, one of the other parts that we do with this, when you start to go deeper, is we do what's called the so what. And some of you might have come across that. It's a really great thing for planning. Someone says something, you say, so what? And every time you have a so what, it should go to a deduction that goes to some sort of action that's going to occur. Otherwise, you ignore it. Now, if you can't say, if you come up with a fact and you can't get to a deduction that says I need to do something because of that fact, the trains can only carry 20,000 people. So what? I need to plan alternate measures of transport to get to the thing. Okay, so there's a fact and there's something to do with it. It's going to be night time. So what? So what? Well, that's a fact I don't need to worry about. Same thing happens within planning, even in IT. If you ask those so what questions, people throw out stuff, so what? What does that mean? What do we have to do? Otherwise, put it to one side. There is a whole range of different ways of doing operational planning. This is basically, I spoke about the strange, but the military we have operational planning processes, which across the Western nations are fairly similar. The ironic thing is, if you're in business, in the military, who do we focus on first when we do operational planning? What's the most important thing to understand at the start? Do you know?
The enemy.
The enemy. And when you do your plan, you have to actually work out what the enemy wants to do. So in business, what does your competitor want to do? And if your plan doesn't deal to what they want to do, then you fail. Quite interesting. And I've worked in organisations, even in the military, but also commercial, where you know the competition's going to do something, and then you go and do your own thing, and it doesn't deal to them. So if you're in competition and you're doing planning, you have to work out how you're going to somehow nullify, defeat, make irrelevant your competition.
Doesn't that make you a follower then?
Sorry?
Isn't that like you to being a follower, not an innovator?
No, not necessarily, because you can say, I can't do that, I'm going to have to do something different. I can't do the way they're all doing it. I can't follow them. So, or I can be a close follower, but it's how you execute it. You're right, but that's that whole thing. We'll do it now because everyone's doing it. I was talking to someone before. When I was at the Foundation of Blind, back in 2004, we virtualised. We're not for profit, we virtualised. I still go to conferences today and I hear people talking about, should I virtualise? It's like, you know, yeah, sorry, why? You know, and that's part of that judgment. All I am saying though is, in the military when we do it, the plan, we have to understand what our opposition is doing. Everyone talks about, you know, the SWOT analysis, classic. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. The threats is the most important thing. And I put it into rugby terms. I've got these wonderful things. We've got a wonderful forward pack, great line out. They've got Jonah. Oh, okay. How do I deal with that Jonah threat? If I don't deal with the Jonah threat, well, nowadays severe, how do I win? Okay? I've got to deal with severe. That's the threat. Forgetting everything else that we can do well, that doesn't matter because he's going to screw me over. And so in that environment, that does it. So the challenge comes back for IT. You have to do a SWOT analysis. Hang on, I'm providing services to the organisation. Why am I doing a SWOT? What's a SWOT analysis for the business? How can I bolster our strength, reinforce our strengths, bolster our weaknesses, and help us get around some of the threats and opportunities, or execute the opportunities and deal with the threats?
The example I was thinking of was Yahoo. I worked at Yahoo for 4 years, and Yahoo used to be an innovator.
Yeah.
Started getting successful, we started looking to, we got to do what Google's doing. It became irrelevant.
Exactly.
Because they became followers.
And slow and not executing very well at all. If you're going to follow, you've got to execute quickly. And that's the whole thing. So.
But we weren't innovating, what I'm saying.
No.
We weren't coming up with new ideas anymore. We were just looking at what Google did and said, we got to answer to that.
Yeah.
They were the leaders.
IT has to be agile as well with it.
Yeah.
Because you may think you know what your enemy is going to do, but it can change. They want you to think it's doing things.
Exactly.
They actually have a strategy in place which would be blown out of the water if you're expecting some change. So I think IT really needs to be agile
and that's that looking forward into the future. Well, in the army we say, you know, that your plane doesn't survive contact with the enemy. In fact, the realists of us say your plane doesn't survive contact with your own troops. And you've all worked in organisations where you've come up with a plan and people go, don't want to do that. But you're right. You have to be ready to move and agile. And as soon as you say, well, we'll get around to that in 6 months, you know, when I was at the ASC, we started getting to the point where we said, you know, we can't do everything. So if we have to get third parties in to help, we'll do that. But we'll actually work with the other parts of the business and say, right, you want to do an application for doing biodiversity or killing rats, which is what the biodiversity guys, the biosecurity guys do. We're full on, but we'll bring some guys in that we know, and we'll sit with you and help you and be the experts with you to guide you through and get them to do the work. Because we can't do it all, but let's do it as a partnership. And so we became more agile by being the expert advisors to the whole organisation, not trying to do everything all the time. And that's the challenge when IT becomes a gatekeeper and says, you know, we have to do everything, and you have to wait your turn. Business gets very frustrated. And that's where the skunk works come up.
John, slightly long, but I think my question is what impact does the weather have? And I say that in the context that I thought the work that you did with the ARC is excellent, really, really good, genuine bouquet there. And one of the great things you did there was build an SAP system that should have been adopted by the Auckland Council as a base point. Now, was it the weather that prevented that sensitive thing happening?
I would say it was the consultants advising the Auckland Council. Auckland Transport cloned our system, didn't take our system, they cloned it, cleaned it up. They spent $3 million, the council spent $60, $70 million to do the same thing. So I'm on a matter of record. I think it's, for this room, basically the process, and I'll stand by the fact that SAP was the right decision. We had quite extensive implementations at the ARC, Auckland City and Waitakere, and they were all working quite well. So the ARC was the largest regional council in the country, and Auckland City was the second largest council. The Auckland Council is the largest council in Australasia, in case people don't know. Brisbane was the biggest. Auckland is the biggest single council in the country in Australasia now. So I stand by that decision. I stand by the decision to select Deloitte to be the implementation partner or the prime. What happened was classic governance. The CIOs who we knew about using doing implementations and holding the hot irons to the feet of the consultants, like Deloitte, so we used Deloitte a lot, we were sidelined. So we weren't involved. The key advisor to the governance committee for the SAP implementation for Auckland Council was Deloitte itself.
And also a major part of the implementation team.
So and transport started later and finished sooner and were fully operational on day one, which Auckland Council wasn't. And they both had to migrate data from 8 systems. Complexity was the same, everything was the same. The transport spent $3 million.
So how was that decision come to?
That's something that it was made by the ATA, by individuals in the ATA. It was never, and there's an article that I started at the moment, the CIOs of Auckland had no input into that implementation process.
Well, as a ratepayer, let me say again, my compliments on the work you did. It was superb. As a ratepayer, I say bugger.
But the weather does matter. The weather does matter as if you're a Scottish supporter and playing Australia. So.
Go Chelsea!
Is there any other further questions? Like I say, this is the third presentation. There's more coming through this year and next year, and looking at the different topics on the Getting IT Right website. I just want to probably issue with the challenge, and that is take some of this knowledge, challenge us if we've got it wrong. We're not open to, we're totally open to being told we've got it wrong, but let's work together, put something that's right, then chuck it out to your businesses, get your businesses to listen. Can we get someone to change? And if we can get one person to change this year, that'd be great.
I'm available for modest fees, email.
Anyway, if we can make change, that's what I'm after, in a positive way. Thank you for your time.